The Healing Spring Show, healing families and communities by breaking the stigma of addiction and expanding the scope of recovery. Now here's your host, John Edmondson.
So what do you do if you're a caregiver, but you need care, you need support, you need help? You've dedicated your life to assisting others, but then you go home and you realize you need assistance. What can that look like? What do you do and how do you find help? Now, therapists, we ask ourselves that question all the time. But there's other fields, too, where they have the exact same challenge. Today, we have a paramedic and firefighter, Casey Ellsworth, and his wife, Crystal, to talk about their journey and their story of seeing there's a challenge and then seeking help. Casey, Crystal, welcome to the show.
Hey, nice to meet you.
Yeah, good to see you. Glad you're here today.
Thank you.
All right, so I think let's start getting to know y'all a little bit. Y'all have been married for how long?
Oh, you put me on the spot.
Boom, right there.
This year will be 15 years.
15 years,
Not
congratulations.
What is it?
7.
Oh, this year will be 8. This year's 8 years.
8 years
15
together,
years
right?
together.
Yeah.
Excuse me.
See, this is why we brought them both on the show, because together they're going to work this out, which is usually the case. We help each other.
I always told her she was happy without a ring, so she didn't really need one.
Oh, is it? That lasted for a little while. So, explain to me, you talked some bit off camera about what you do. So tell us all a little bit. You're a paramedic and a firefighter. Walk us through that a little bit.
Yeah, so in Dallas, we're actually one of the largest agencies in the country that we do both, firefighter and paramedic, which means we split our time about 50-50, where we ride an engine and a fire truck, and then the other part of the time we ride an ambulance. And we ride 2 paramedic unit, which a paramedic, for those of you that don't know, is a emergency medical technician. There's basic level, intermediate level, and then paramedic. And paramedic, basically, there's a joke out there that says the EMT basics save the paramedics save lives, which is not true. But together, it makes a really good team. In Dallas, we're fortunate enough to work double paramedic units. I started in Dallas about 10 years ago, and love it.
Yeah, we were talking about before, you're so passionate about what you do. So what is the life of a paramedic and a firefighter? We think about it. We kind of maybe see something on TV. Maybe we see a fire. We see the kind of end of it when the cameras are around and paramedics are working with someone or the ambulance drive away. What's a little bit of the day in the life of a paramedic?
So just as humans, I think we're only going to let people know what you want them to know. Whether, similar to Facebook, people that are having problems at home, they will only post the happy times on Facebook. They'll post all the vacations, but really inside they can be in shambles. Some of us are similar. We're no different than anybody else. There are a lot of perks to the job, the schedule, the brotherhood, the flexibility of it. Every day is a new day. It's a different day. You don't know what the next call is going to bring. But then also, you see things that aren't necessarily the most appealing to see and deal with. We also, it's a sense of pride that a lot of us carry, and,
Yeah, it's a sense of pride to be part of that, to go out and do it, and just to kind of go into the experience of it, of helping other people, being in the field of service as well. And you said something that was very important right off the beginning. You said you kind of show what we need to show, and that's part of that. With all of us, like therapists too, we have a little bit of we're authentic, but we have a little bit of front. You're not going to know everything that's going on with us because our role is to be of service to you.
Sure. And
I think when people experience or watch you, they see what many people will say, and I hope it's okay, word to use is hero, right? You come in, you saved my life, you helped me, you made this change. I mean, we're running out of the building, y'all are running into the building, we're trying to get away from the harm, you're going towards the harm. And so we're usually in awe of you and amazed by that. And I think it's very easy to forget the fact that you're human as well.
And most of us are going to tell you we're not heroes, we're just doing our job. The running in and out of the building and stuff, that's a lot of the Hollywood, mantra, I guess. That's kind of how people see us.
Yeah.
You're right, but it's almost like a Iron Man kind of facade. If you think about a brick house, you've got a strong outside, but there's actually soft pieces on the inside.
That makes a lot of sense. And when you're at work, you don't necessarily show that.
Correct.
At work, that's where those parts of the helper comes out and need to be almost a little bit kind of just not into the emotions, just into doing.
Oh, yeah. If we got emotionally involved in every single patient that we dealt with in a day, I mean, we have some engines and ambulances in Dallas that clear 20 runs almost every day that they go to work.
Wow.
And so just becoming emotionally involved in every single one of those patients that'd be taxing on anybody. Whether if you're dealing with, trauma or you're dealing with just the run-of-the-mill run.
Yeah, I bet you see things in one day that we maybe don't see in a lifetime. So it makes sense. People on the outside go, well, he maybe they're cold or so serious or overly professional, but the reality is to get through it, that's maybe what you need to do.
Yeah, so we're trained ever since day one to hold ourselves to a little bit higher standard. Not that we're better than anybody else at all, but we do. We're representing ourselves. We're representing a city. We're representing our fire station. We're representing. There's a lot kind of on the line there, and so the last thing you want to do is go out and make a bad name for yourself or bad reputation for the city or whatever department that you work for.
Right. And so we know you do these great things, and everyone who's watching always appreciates that and honors people to go out there and help. The first responders are such a great gift to so many people. Without you, we'd be in such bad shape. It wouldn't happen. So many things, lives wouldn't be saved. But then, as a therapist, I know that I go home, and even if I put on that powerful front and helping people, I'm still affected a little bit about the stories that I hear. Well, in your case, it's stories that you see. Can you tell us, if it's okay, a little bit, what's that like being this strong man in front helping people, but then still being a human being that has to drive home and be in a marriage and have kids?
Can you juggle?
Not very good, sometimes.
I can't at all. But you learn pretty quick in the fire service. You learn, it's almost like, I try to explain to people, it's like walking three big dogs. But sometimes the size of that dog changes. We have the organization and whatever your thoughts are of them and how they're affecting you and how... So you have the organization, then you also have our family, whatever struggles and stuff are going on at home, and then we also have the runs and stuff that we deal with day in, day out. And so there are days that we have three big bull mastiffs that we're walking, and you're getting pulled in three different directions, and you kind of got to pick. Which one do I pick first? Kind of which direction do I take?
Yeah, where do I go? How do I
first?
handle that? Yeah.
Correct. Then there's other days that you have three little weenie dogs, or Dotson hounds. So you have those where that's not going to be as big of a struggle, but you're still, and there'll be days that they're all kind of walking in the same direction. Life's great. But then one of those may pull hard to the side, and then that's kind of where we kind of get torn.
Right, that makes sense. And in fact, for you, you're someone who not only has experienced it, but you're a peer supporter. Tell us about that role. How do you support? You're helping the helper, essentially.
So it's pretty rewarding, but it's difficult at the same time because it's peer support. I think sometimes we like to put it on a pedestal and make it something that it's really not, because simply a peer support is just brothers taking care of brothers, or brothers taking care of sisters, or sisters taking care of sisters. One of my good friends, Scott Robinson, up in Maryland, I think he says it best that nobody takes care of us better than us. And so we're still down in the grind. We're still making the same runs, and so whenever we have that feeling that nobody understands and nobody knows what I'm really going through,
right.
And you do reach out to a peer supporter, somebody that's there, and some of the training is, teaches you not to fix their issues rather than just be someone to listen. And that's really what a lot of us need. And the most important piece of peer support is just learning how to listen to people. Just somebody that's non-judgmental, that they can call, they can explode on you and yell and scream or get emotional or whatever they're gonna do, and you don't necessarily react. You're a sounding board, and they don't have to worry about any repercussions. They don't have to worry about their officers coming down on them, or worry about getting transferred out of their fire station, or admin questioning, are they fit for the job or not. So I don't know if that makes sense or not.
Makes a lot of sense. You're giving people a chance to get all that stuff out that they're holding inside. Even the best human being, to hold it all in is unsustainable. And so there was this study that I heard about where they talked about where emotional pain and psychological pain or physical pain go through the same pathway in the brain. So just like no one, you've probably seen this 100 times, no one can last indefinitely through physical pain. Same thing, no one can last indefinitely through psychological pain. And so you're giving this service to people where they can come vent to you instead of pretending like everything's all right and then exploding on their boss or making their station look bad. You're actually improving their performance. You're actually improving the cohesion on the team, for what I'm hearing, just by listening.
Yeah, I mean, you're definitely right. It's going to come out in some form or fashion.
Right.
And, right now mental health is kind of the hot topic in the fire service, first responder world, police work, military. And a lot of people sometimes will Google, signs and symptoms and stuff like that. And those are the things that we're actually focusing on, because that's what we can see.
Mm-hmm.
But it does, and that's a lot of times how that stress comes out is through those signs and symptoms versus the non-traditional way, especially in the first responder world, of talking about it.
Right. And you have your own story. You came up peer supported because you went through your own experiences, a couple, that you worked through yourself. What was it? What was your story? What was the challenges you had? If we can talk about it a little bit.
Yeah, absolutely. So for me, I joined the fire service at a pretty young age because the family dynamics that I had when I was younger were quite challenging. And, and so I actually, according to my therapist, I kind of taught myself how to be pretty resilient, which doesn't mean I wasn't affected, because I definitely was. And so I joined the fire department for more of the family dynamic aspect of it. And then after I got on, I started realizing that they're struggling with the same stuff I am, even on the job, because the divorce rate's so high. And it really bothered me. But when you come in, you're a hard-charged, young, ambitious, snot-nosed rookie that doesn't know anything, mm-hmm. which is a lot of times a perception. There wasn't really anything that I felt like I could do. In 2010, 2011, I was part of the Firefighter secret list. It's not really a secret. You just have to sign up for it online. But where we got a lot of the emails and stuff from over the country about difficulties and suicides mm-hmm. in other departments around the country. And, and that really bothered me as well. And it just bothered me, like, why aren't we looking at this?
Right.
Type stuff. And so I was never really a fireman's fireman, if that makes sense. I didn't really work at the hot houses of the year, the ones that really are the busiest and they fight the most fire and all that kind of stuff. It wasn't until about 2017, May 1st to be exact, that it was a Monday morning and we got called to a gunshot wound. And when we pulled up, some of the comments said, like on the way there, that it was a possibly self-inflicted gunshot wound, that we actually run quite a bit of those, sadly to say. And some of them aren't actually successful, so we actually still have to work. There's a job to do when we get there. And so we pulled up. The address we got was bad. And the guy that I was riding with, he found the guy on the other side of the cross street, and there was a man laying there with a bloodied up face. And, so we pulled up and we got out. Well, little did we know, a guy had another plan for us, and he came out with an AR-15 and started shooting at us. And I won't get all into it because it takes a little bit to get through the whole story, but sure. As I ran away, I know that I was shot at, I think minimum seven times. The partner that I was riding with was shot, and police ended up picking him up and taking him to the hospital. They ended up cracking his chest open from one side all the way to the other. And when they said they cracked his chest, they said there wasn't one drop of blood that came out. He bled out every drop of blood in his body. So it wasn't until now, today, he's doing a lot better. He's not fully active duty or anything, but right. He is still back on the job and working, and we talk quite a bit. For him, he tells me it's like I went to sleep and woke up with a broken leg, because he was 80% of his tibia and fibula were shattered, as well as his femur. And so that's how he lost all that blood.
So for him, it was just, he probably had some trauma to work through too.
Sure.
But so he goes kind of just went through it and woke up, and then your experience, and I'm glad he's doing okay. When you told me that story, at first I jumped a little bit when I heard it. And Crystal, I saw you for a second. Even hearing the story was still something that could be affected. We want to talk about that in a little while too. But you're saying that you were shot at 7 times.
Yes, I was. So
7.
The first 2, when Will, he came running around the back of the ambulance. He basically saw the shooter first and said, "We got to get out of here. There's a guy right there," and he pointed to him with an AR. And so after trying to figure out which way we were going to run or how we were going to get out of there, I ended up making up the side of the ambulance, and the guy was there and he took a shot. I ran to the back of the ambulance and told Will, we can't drive that way, because that's where the guy was. He was on the corner lot, and running across the street seemed like it was way too far. And running on this side, that seemed like a bad idea, because that's the same side
That's where
of the
he's
road
going, yeah.
he was on. Yeah, and so, but Will was pretty adamant, "Hey, we got to get out of here." So, all right, get in the back of the ambulance. And I walked up the side of the ambulance again, and he fired at me again. So I ran to the back of the ambulance. Well, this time he was walking towards me, and it was, he was moving. So now I got real nervous. And so the back of the ambulance is kind of a corner, like a box. And so I'm standing at that box trying to figure out which way I needed to go, because I didn't know if he was going to come around the front of the ambulance or if he was going to come around the back. But the original patient that we had was still laying there on the ground. I heard 2 additional gunshots. They weren't at me. He actually ended up getting shot 2 more times point blank in the shoulder blade. And when I heard those is when I took off running. And then at that point, my partner, he heard those 2 gunshots, and he got out of the ambulance to try to follow me. And it was said that as I was running away, he was shooting, and then that's when he shot my partner when he got out of the ambulance to come follow me. That's whenever he ended up getting shot.
That's when it happened. And so this is the kind of thing we hear about in the news, but this is the thing you lived. So this is part of your personal story.
I had a front row seat.
You had a front row seat to it, and I'm guessing at the time you may not even notice, and the adrenaline's running, you're going through it, but then you get home. Did you? So this is the question I have. We hear about it on the news, and then it kind of seems like it just goes away after a while. Like we go through our news cycle, we talk about it. But I don't think, and you tell me if I'm wrong, life goes back to normal right after that for you. But correct me if I'm wrong. What was it like? You go home, you go to the hospital, you talk to Crystal. What happened?
So it's kind of funny. So I actually made the block. I was coming back down that street to go pick him up, and all I was going to do was try to pick him up and throw him in the floorboard of the ambulance and drive away, because I told people on the radio, don't come in here, and once they finally found out that there was a shooter there, we didn't want anybody else getting shot. And so police were there, they were exchanging gunfire with the guy, and so I ended up, the police were telling me, get down, and so, but I kept pointing to Will running down the middle of the street, because I wanted to go get him. Well, they told me to lay down, so I laid down on the side of this car, and I called my captain at the station. I said, hey, go to the hospital, when I saw the cops drive away, because DPD loaded him up in the car and took him to the hospital. Well, at that point, then a DPD officer comes and picks me up, takes me 1 block, and says, get out. And so I got out, and I was surrounded by police at that point. I mean, technically I was safe. Yeah. And, well, she had called me at the time, and so I answered the phone. Well, I don't know, because I think we have pretty good communication with one another, and we seem to talk, and I actually know her, and so I knew she was going to feed off of my energy. And so when she called me, she said, hey, is everything okay? I said, yeah, we're on a run. I'll call you back in just a little bit. And she said, okay, and hung up.
Wow. So that's what I want to ask about, and we wanted to bring in Crystal. Thank you for being here too. A couple things is for people who are paramedics and firefighters, knowing they're not alone is the right off the bat. You said some things which were many people wouldn't think of. Is that here's a paramedic, he's in therapy, so you're actually willing to go into that. You're the exception, maybe, but maybe there's more out there I don't even know about. But also, it's the wives. You're also not alone. I want them to hear that, what it's like and what are some things they can do to maybe work through their challenges. You said immediately the communication is pretty good. You think of her, so you didn't tell her, and I'm guessing that's the norm, what was going on at the time. I bet a lot of them would have that same thing. He's not talking to me. He's not telling me. This makes sense. You don't want her to worry. You care about her so much.
Right.
But then you might be in a state where it's like, well, what's going on? When do I know when things are really happening?
Right.
Can you tell? Yeah, go ahead.
In that particular instance, I was mad at him afterwards, knowing when he called me and he was still on scene and he didn't tell me what was going on. But then a little bit later, I realized why he did it, and I'm glad that he did, because I would have panicked. And like he said, I do feed off of his energy, so when he told me he was on a run, it brought me down. But also, I think that communication is important. I know that we have that sort of communication about runs and things that are happening, and he tells me what I need to know and what's important. And so, not that it was okay that he's lying and saying, oh, it's fine when it's not fine, but when he tells me that, I know, okay, if he was really in danger, he would have said. He would have told me that's what I needed to know.
Right.
But when he said, we're on a run, it's fine, I'll call you later, then I immediately got brought down. I'm here because I had already known what was going on, and I immediately got brought down because he said, I'll call you later, I'm fine, I'm okay. And having that communication, though, I think is really important, because I already know if something is really bothering him or if something happened that I needed to know about, he would tell me. And I think a lot of times with firemen, they don't have that communication with their wives. They do try to hold it in and not tell them in protection of them, but in reality, it does more harm than good to not let them know. Because really, I think we're the first ones that see the change. They may not necessarily even know that they're changing, but we see it and we feel it. And if we don't have that communication where I can tell him, like, listen, you're being crazy right now, I need you to figure out what's going on, then it could go on for years before he gets help or we get help. I mean, we know people that have gotten divorced because of things that weren't talked about.
Yeah, it could have been worked through. In case you'd said that earlier, was the divorce rate is so high, and that communication thing is what you're talking about. This is such a high-stress job,
right,
that if we're not really working as a team, it may be hard to maintain that marriage.
Right.
And so you're saying being aware of that sometimes he's going to tell you things but not tell you everything.
Right.
And that's not personal or it's not dishonest. It's really just about an expression of love.
Right.
And caring about it. But then for all the men out there, maybe be willing to hear a little bit if their wives say, or vice versa, if their husbands say, if they're the ones who are married to a first responder, that, hey, something's going on here, you need to work on it.
Right.
And be willing to hear that.
Right.
So one of the things that we did is you have to bring it up before it happens. The communication piece.
Right.
You have to get on that same page. Because if not, us going home, and we were taught, going back to rookie school, that I was told, I think it's a little different now, but we were told back then, you can't go home and tell other people the things that you see at work.
Right.
And we had a run at a city that I worked at before Dallas, and I was 19 years old when I first got on, and I came home and told the world, and man, they looked at me like I was an alien. Like I was beside myself. Like, man, why are y'all acting like that for? I mean, this happened,
Right.
And so when you're taught that, then you come home, no matter how bad it hurts, and then you ask the guys at the station, hey, do y'all talk to your wife? They don't need to know this. When in reality they do, and it calms them down too. When you have that, share that communication, you share that bond, but you have to do it before. It can't be right when I'm coming home and I'm ready to unload, and she's like, time out, don't want to hear it. Because once we get the door slammed in our face, then it becomes a match on who's going to get the upper hand.
Conversation. Yeah.
And so the another thing that we did too is we kind of talked about boundaries a little bit. What are the things that you necessarily don't care to hear about? So for her, it's simply the blood and the guts. She doesn't care to hear about that.
Where's my breaking point, essentially?
Right.
What can I hear up until this point? Okay, that's enough stuff.
Yeah, so I can tell her that we had a bad car wreck, and even telling her we cut kids out of the car, or telling her we had to cut some people out of the car yesterday, or they were ejected from the car, without going into all the gory details, And then the other part is the transition time when we get home. That was kind of a red flag for us. The shooting kind of, I tell people to give me street credit, essentially. I talked earlier, I wasn't a fireman's fireman, worked at all those busy firehouses and stuff like that. I wasn't known as the guy. But after that shooting, people started kind of looking at me, and even people came up to me after, and they wanted to ask me, how are you doing? But they were like, well, but I didn't want to trigger you, and I didn't know what was going to happen, type stuff. But I told them, oh, you just ask somebody, how are you doing? And, when they react, there are things that you can do, but it's like, you don't know how they're going to react. They may just want to know, hey, somebody cares. You may be the first person asking them, how are you doing?
Right.
After that, because everybody else felt, well, if I trigger them or this or that.
Too cautious.
So, a lot of it happened, the shooting gave me that street credit, but a lot of it happened before. Like, I was an angry person before. I tried to put on that facade, and I knew I couldn't lose it at the fire station, because if firemen see that something bothers you, buddy, you better believe it, they're going to just keep doing it and doing it and doing it until you break. Right, wrong, or indifferent, that's the way that it is. So I would have to spend 24 hours at the fire station knowing that I can't get mad. And then so basically I drove home, and then boom, that's where the explosion would happen. Simple things like, which I'm fortunate enough that she stays at home. And so simple things of, hey, can I get you a cup of coffee? Well, I drink coffee every other effing morning. What makes today any different? I mean, to the outsider, a non-first responder, I mean, that's a
They're like, what's going on here?
Jerk move.
Yeah.
Like, your wife, first of all, she's awake when you get home. She's happy to see you for 2. And then she's offering you coffee for 3, and that's how you respond? And I knew it wasn't normal, and I knew it wasn't right, but at the same time, I didn't know why I was doing it. So I just, tell myself. So going back to the communication piece, after I did go to therapy, I used the shooting to go through for that as the reason to go to therapy. But the therapist was pretty quick to point out that it was a lot of my childhood, of a lot of the signs and symptoms I was having, the emotional numbness. Basically, I cut off my emotions. So my wife asked me if I wanted a cup of coffee, would send me over the edge. And then when she would cry about it or get upset, which is a typical reaction from somebody who's got yelled at, especially by your husband, then I would just tell her, well, is the whole day ruined now because of a simple comment this morning? And, and again, I knew that wasn't right, but what she was quick to point out, though, is a lot of my childhood, why that stuff came out. And so what ended up happening was we had to talk about transition periods. So when I get home, what happens? So I don't like her in my face giving me a kiss. I don't like the dog licking my leg. I always joke, kick the dog, hit the wife. I don't really do that, but it was all in my face when I would get home. Well, if I'm still here, the switch is still on, and it's on because we don't know what the last run we're going to have is. And it doesn't even have to be those difficult calls either, if that makes sense.
Sure.
A lot of times it could just be like accumulative things, like just, you spend 6 months at paramedic school learning about all these life-saving techniques and all this stuff that you can use. Some guys will go 2 or 3 months after getting in the field, and they don't even start an IV, depending on where you're at in the city. If you're downtown, you deal with a lot of the homeless populations and people like that they may not necessarily call for true emergencies. I mean, like, my knee hurts, or my baby won't stop crying. I mean, those are actual 911 calls, not to belittle anybody's thought of calling 911, because truly that is their worst day that we're showing up to. So, but when we're coming home, we had to communicate, hey, so this is kind of what we're going to do. So, like, what we came up with is I'm going to approach her. So there's days that I come home and I take a quick shower and then I take a nap. There are days I come home, I put in my headphones and I start mowing the grass. There are days I call her and say, hey, I'm going to stop by the gym and do some swimming or work out before I come home. But if you don't have that conversation beforehand, you just start to do it because it's healthy and that's what we're supposed to do. Well, but we haven't told them. Well, now it's like,
they're ignoring me. What did I do?
There's a story going on.
now they take it personal and all this other stuff. Well, then what happens, now they bring it up. Hey, you don't, how come you didn't give me a kiss this morning? Well, in my head, because Casey said, you don't have to necessarily do that. But if you just automatically stop, then they take it personal,
Yeah, so it's the communication, which is the key.
Right.
Sounds like the most important part. We're starting to come to the close of the show. There's so much more we could talk about. Do you have any more advice? How to get started with all this? Sounds like you all have a lot of experience and have worked through it. Where would someone get started? Where would they go for help?
So for me, I can just talk from my own personal experience. After the shooting, what I thought of was who has been in this situation, who on the fire department has been shot at. And there wasn't anybody I could think of. But there was a guy that I used to work with that I knew he was in the military. I knew he had a Purple Heart. And, I was never in the military, but I know Purple Heart means, a lot.
Yeah.
So, and they don't give them out to everybody. So I actually went and ate lunch with him. And the best thing that helped me was him telling me it gets better. And so when I would have a hard time or a hard day, a difficult day, because even after therapy, you have good days and bad days.
Sure.
But just hearing it, so when I started having a bad day, I could just remember, it's going to get better. So just knowing it doesn't...
Finding someone that relates.
Yeah, will be probably the key. It's whether, and in peer support, that's essentially kind of the way that I operate is someone calls, my brain starts thinking immediately, who's been in this situation before?
Mm-hmm.
Whether
connect them to.
Yeah, if you're the spouse of a fireman, and that's huge. Families are huge. We have to involve them. And if you miscarried a baby or something, I can listen to you, but I can't relate to that. So I have wives and things lined up that I know that they're in a better place now and things like that, and they can relate. But it doesn't have to necessarily be a professional or a peer supporter. It could be a neighbor. It could be someone from church. It could be a counseling center directly. But if you don't know, you're still not going to know if you don't ever take that chance and ask. So within doubt, look up even peer support or CISM or a chaplain can even guide you in a direction.
So it sounds like get some help when you need it. Don't wait too long. And if you get that help, then it's going to get better.
Yes, the two biggest times that people call, a lot of firemen will call, is when their job is affected or their family life's affected. But depending on your family dynamic or what was actually going on at work, it may be too late. So when your wife starts looking at you and telling you, you're not the person that I married, that's my flag. That's a signal, hey, maybe I should evaluate myself. And because not every single person has to go to counseling.
Right.
Everybody can benefit from it, but not everybody just absolutely by all means has to go right now.
Yeah, but at least getting started with it. So, Casey, Crystal, thank you for being on the show today. That was a really great message for everyone to hear, and we hope to have you back soon.
Well, thank you for having us.
Thank you very much.
Appreciate that.
So it sounds like get help when you need it. Don't wait too long, and find people that you relate to is going to be the best way to go. And again, we always thank you for watching our show.